Hello. Um, Delightful evening. Hi there. How are you this day? Hopefully the answer is well. Um, yep, you've guessed it. This is Harry Potter Abridged, and we're back. So we are continuing with our. Hang on, I've got to make some. I got to make an adjustment here. How's that gonna be? Something like that. Yeah, that should be good. Okay. We are continuing with Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Which, by the way, so I've been on a Stephen Fry kick lately with my audiobooks because I'm kind of a regular audiobook listener, and it decided not too long ago that it was time to return to these lovely books, which I haven't listened to in, I don't know, maybe a couple of years now. Anyway, that was a point. Well, the point was, I think that I listened to this one not too long ago. I'm already into Prisoner of Azkaban now, but there was something. Oh well, it will return when it should. Anyway, so point being is I've been in a bit of a Potter mood of late, and I've really been meaning to get to this episode for a little while now, because I actually at one point listened to it a couple times, this chapter, and read it. So hopefully that preparation, which is now a little ways in the past, like a week and a half or something, will still have been worth something. Anyway, this is chapter 7 in the Chamber of Secrets book, and it is called Mudbloods and Murmurs, which admittedly is kind of an ominous title for a chapter, especially the first time you read this, because you don't really necessarily have any reference for mudblood yet. However, it's still kind of an ugly word outright, so you have a bit of foreshadowing, and named chapter titles are kind of a strange thing to me sometimes, because they can give away too much sometimes. But I would say that on the whole, that Rowling does a pretty good job with this in these books. I've been kind of paying attention to that. Things I've been paying attention to recently include that. Also, trying to pay attention to the differences between Fred and George, because I have to admit that even after countless readings and more listening tos, really, I still do kind of, even though I recognize that they're two different people, I do kind of lump them into one character sometimes. And I would say I'm sure that there are some people here who would be like, "Oh yeah, totally, me too," and the other people would be like, "Oh my God, I can't believe they're so different." I read a little thing about it not too long ago. It's I don't know. There are the Fred is mentioned more by he's by a significant margin. Not a huge margin, but a significant one. Fred seems to be a bit more of the instigator. George is maybe the slightly tougher one. It's there's these things that I read that I'm still kind of trying to parse out of the text when I'm actually listening or reading. Anyway, was there? I feel like there was a third thing that I've been paying attention to, but that was definitely a big one. Is just trying to pay attention to the Fred and George thing. Yeah, perhaps something else will come up. Anyway, as you may recall, the previous chapter ended with the first Lockhart lesson, which ended with the pixie disaster. And so as a result of that, and also because of just how Lockhart is around Harry, always trying to drag him into like his confidence and like into a spotlight somewhere, or trying to tell him that, basically advising him on things that he has no interest in because he's not trying to do what Lockhart thinks he's trying to do. Anyway, so yes, we get mentions here at the beginning of this chapter that he's been avoiding Lockhart whenever he catches a sight of him. And we also get a mention of Colin Creevy, who, I mean, you gotta love him in a way because he's just so like, innocent and bright. But like in a way, he's kind of almost like a Jar Jar Binks kind of character. I mean, maybe not that bad, obviously, but you're just like, oh, okay, Colin. Like you definitely feel for Harry with Colin, because you're like, the things that even though he's just excited and all, it's just like, wow, okay. Anyway, so yeah, so every time Harry runs into him, he's always like, all right, Harry. And so there's that, and Harry just like, he doesn't hate the kid or anything. He just, it's like Colin sort of like represents like the most naive attitude of the wizarding world towards Harry, of like sort of like seeing him as more than he wants to be seen as. Let's put it that way. Anyway, let's see. So basically, we're getting a little a summary of like why things suck right now. Apparently, Hedwig's still angry with Harry because of the car crash and everything that happened with the Whomping Willow and all of that. Ron's wand is still messed up because of course it is. I think about the thing with Ron and his wand, and it's like, I know that the Weasleys are poor, and that the Weasleys were like humiliated and frustrated by the whole issue of them stealing the car and all of that went along with that, but they also really care about their children's education, like a lot. Surely they know about Ron's wand. How it doesn't, it strains credibility that he can make it through this whole school year with a broken wand. Like, that really, for all intents and purposes, can't do any magic. If anything, we get a little bit of a look into at some point, and maybe it's it is this chapter. All right, so we won't go there yet. But we get a chance to sort of see maybe what Ron would be capable of in some of his stronger moments. And which, I mean, he does do better later, obviously, but in the backfired spell thing. Anyway, right, and Ron's wand did some thing in charms and hit Flitwick in the eyes. So they get to the weekend. Harry's glad for the weekend. And they're planning to go visit Hagrid, but of course, Wood comes along and wakes Harry up like early. For a Quidditch practice, which you gotta love Wood. I mean, well, you don't, but I do. He's because he's like, I don't know. He's not like he's really into the sport, but he's not a like a stereotypical jock type guy. Like, he's not like a McLaggen or somebody like that. He's not particularly egotistical or any of those types of things. He's just really passionate about the game. In fact, the gaming aspect of the game as opposed to the sporting aspect of it, in fact, I would say. Which, I mean, let's face it, if you're flying on a broomstick, there's only so much of it that is truly sport anyway. I mean, you're tossing, the balls around, I guess. But right. So anyway, so yeah, Harry's like, fucking crack of dawn, it's early Wood, and Wood's all manically excited about getting their new training program going. So anyway, so they do that, and well, Wood leaves and asks Harry to meet him in 15 minutes. So he groggily gets out of bed and gets his things together and goes down the staircase. And yeah, just as he's about to leave, he hears some steps coming down behind him, and of course it's Colin Creevy again. And the first thing he does is he shows him the picture that Lockhart kind of sort of put together in the I believe it was the previous chapter, where Harry was like really didn't want to be in it. Anyway, and Harry is happy to note that in the picture there's only an arm that represents Harry, like kind of tugging out of the frame. So his photographic self has the same attitude that he had when the photograph was being taken. So, and then of course Colin wants him to sign it, and he's like, no. Let me start by saying, fuck no. And he looks around to make sure that nobody's listening, which, I mean, first of all, he's going to say no anyway, and second of all, it's not like there's going to be Slytherins in the Gryffindor common room. So anyway, and so he's like, yep, gotta go Quidditch practice. And of course, instead of being put off, Colin's like, which, by the way, like Colin Creevy's like Mickey Mouse, I think, too, is the other thing that's happening there. I mean, that's just the voice that just came up. So yeah, he just like follows him down to the pitch, and he starts asking questions, and Harry ends up having to explain the entire game, which he does, like not unkindly, as they would say, because he's just a really excited, fairly naive-ish little boy. So, and Harry's only in his second year, so it's not like they're just like miles apart, but Colin's just a little bit more, I don't know. It's hard to say somebody's youthful for their age when their age is 11, but that's kind of, in a way, I don't know, it's not quite right, but that's the best I'm coming up with right now. Anyway, so right, he breaks down the rules of Quidditch again, which serves as that sort of a refresher for the reader that Rowling likes to put in, especially the earlier books. I can't remember if she does it as much later. I feel like not, because I mean, really, like, you're not going to pick up like Order of the Phoenix as your first Harry Potter book, and so anyway, not that you really should pick any of them up as your first one except for the first one, but maybe somebody might pick up one of the earlier ones because they're short. I don't know. Maybe it's just because they're children and she expects they're reading them each year. There's a reason. There's some. I mean, and I think to a certain degree, all authors do that. If they have a lot of characters or a lot of situations, they'll do the bit of refresher. But she's definitely very. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I've listened to them so many times that I feel like it's less necessary. That's also possible. Right, all of the rules of Quidditch, the snitch, Harry's a seeker, keeper, Colin keeps talking, right, and so then they go into the training room, and so yeah, they're not even actually, as it turns out, they're not actually starting practice. Like, Woods got like tactical things that he wants to discuss for their new training program, but everybody's like falling asleep in the room there. So he goes on, and he says it's going to be a quick talk, but of course he goes on for a while. He's got a big diagram, and he's got, it's like the football plays where you draw it up on a board and shit. New tactics. So yeah, by any estimation, it's probably like over an hour or about an hour that this whole thing takes. So, blah 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 blah. And so yeah, so he goes on and on and on and on and on, and then he wraps up, and he's like, "Any questions?" And George, not Fred, George, says, "I've got a question, Oliver. Why couldn't you have told us all this yesterday when we were awake?" So, of course, Wood gets frustrated, but I mean, like, Wood's well-meaning, but it probably wasn't a great idea to drag your team in at the crack of dawn for a lecture. Like, maybe if you're going to go up and fly first and try to explain it to them on their brooms, the wind would wake them up, but you just drug them into another room where they can all just slouch down and fall back asleep. Oh well. Anyway, and so of course, Wood's all like, we should have won last year. We're easily the best team, but things happened, blah blah blah. And we find out that the last match of the previous season, which Harry missed because of the thing that happened in under the school, with the Voldemort and the Quirrell and the mirror and the thing and the stone, and right. Anyway, so he missed the last match, and so Gryffindor suffered their worst defeat in 300 years. And so Wood gets it back together, and he's like, "This year we're training harder than ever before." And so they're like, then he's like, "Let's go put our new theories into practice." Meanwhile, like, nobody has any idea what he was talking about for the most part. Who knows? Maybe the Chasers were paying attention. They seem like very responsible young ladies. And so they come out on the pitch, and Ron and Hermione are in the stands now, and Ron's like, "Aren't you finished?" And Harry's like, "Yeah, we haven't started yet." So they get up in the air. They're waiting, and as I forecasted earlier, the flying and the wind in the face, wakes them up better than anything else. And then we find out that Colin is still there, and he's taking pictures now, which, I mean, talk about dedicated. He just sat there. I mean, Ron and Hermione are Harry's friends, and they just came up from the Great Hall, probably had something to eat and everything first, whereas Colin just came out there on a whim and has just been sitting out there like for an hour and a half, however long it's been, just chilling, just waiting for Harry to come out and play. Dun, 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 dun. And Wood thinks that Creevy might be a Slytherin spy, and that's when Harry's like, no, he's in Gryffindor. Because first Harry's like, I don't know who that is. But he's like, no, he's in Gryffindor. He's not a Slytherin. And then George is like, well, Slytherins don't need a spy, because here they are. And so, after Wood brought everybody out early and could have actually already had like an hour plus worth of actual practice time in, instead, just as they're about to get started with their practice, the Slytherins are coming onto the pitch, and Wood's all pissed off because, "I booked this. We'll see about this." So, blah, 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 blah. So the Slytherins come sauntering up, as Slytherins are wont to do. And, Wood's like, "But I booked the pitch." And Flint's like, "Yeah, that's cool and all, but I got a note from Professor Snape. And the note says that they can practice because they have to train their new seeker." And Wood's like, "You got a new seeker, did you?" And then From behind the large 6 figures before them came a 7th, smaller boy, smirking all over his pale, pointed face. So, Malfoy. Fucking Malfoy. And Fred, not George, Fred says, "Aren't you Lucius Malfoy's son?" And Flint's like, "Yeah, it's funny you mentioned his father because, let me show you how Draco bought his way onto the team. I mean, here's these brooms that we got. Aren't they nice? That was a gift. It was a gift. Mr. Malfoy. Gift." So, they all have Nimbus 2001s, which is the model after Harry's. So, yeah. Blah, blah, blah. So, they brag about their brooms. Something about penis jokes. So basically, the Slytherins just talk a bunch of shit and insult the Gryffindors for having lesser brooms. And then Ron and Hermione come over because they're like, "WTF, guys? Thought you were training. We came to watch you. You weren't here. You came out. Now you're still not doing. What the fuck's going on?" And so of course then Ron's like, "Oh, you. Why is a Malfoy on this team?" And so and then Ron sees the brooms. And, of course, that's, distressing. Because Ron understands that stuff, probably more than all of them. Well, not all of them, but many of them. I mean, I guess they all understand pretty good at this point. Except perhaps Hermione. And that's by choice. Right, and of course, as any time that there's a time for Malfoy to actually speak when he's around Ron, then of course there's going to be an insult about his family and how poor they are, blah, 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 and Hermione jumps in and is like, at least no one on Gryffindor had to buy their way in. They got on pure talent, which of course she's the one person that doesn't really know as much about who has good talent and who doesn't, but she's still right. She's pretty much dead on here. So, and that's when dun 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 Malfoy's like, "No one asked your opinion, you filthy little mudblood." And everybody's like, "Oh, he said mother," stuff like that. But of course, Harry doesn't have any idea what happened. But Fred and George jump at Malfoy, and Flint has to stop them. And Alicia shrieks, "How dare you!" And Ron, not thinking about his messed up wand, reaches into his robes and pulls it out, and he's like, "You'll pay for that, Malfoy." And he doesn't, and worth noting that this is not Ron doesn't say whatever the spell is. We're gonna assume that he just is so angry that he's actually doing a nonverbal spell and not realizing it, and we won't say that it's that J.K. Rowling hadn't thought about verbal versus nonverbal spells yet, because it is the second book, and maybe she hadn't. Who knows? Anyway, he shoots a green jet, by the way, of light, which is the color of the Avada Kedavra spell, the killing spell, killing curse, not spell. Anyway, it doesn't go at Malfoy. It backfires because of his broken wand and hits him, and he falls back on the grass, and everybody's like, "What the fuck?" And Ron opens his mouth to speak, but instead slugs come out, which is, pretty fucking gross. So anyway, for one reason or another, they decide to take Ron to Hagrid, which is interesting because Hagrid's not in any way really a medical expert, as it were. But Harry's like, it's nearest. I guess maybe they thought, well, Ron obviously tried to do something he wasn't supposed to do. Maybe they figured Hagrid could help at least in some way. It's hard to say. Anyway, they get there, and well, let me say first that before they actually get there, of course, everybody kind of like showed up at the pitch staggered, and Colin shows up last, and he's like, "Ooh, can you hold him still, Harry?" And he's like gonna try to take a picture of Ron belching slugs, which, I mean, come on, Colin. So yeah, Harry's like, "Get out of the way, enough of you." So they head out, and they get to Hagrid's. Where do they get to Hagrid's? There it is, right about... Oh, they almost get to Hagrid's, and as they're about to get there, they see Lockhart coming out of the front door. And Harry's like, over here. Just sorry, Ron, I know you're belching slugs and all, but hang tight, bro, because we ain't trying to fuck with Lockhart right now. And Lockhart's, of course, just yammering on about whatever it is that he's yammering on about. He's like, if you need any help, blah, blah, blah. He's talking about one of his books, and so he leaves, and they wait until he kind of disappears up the grounds a little ways, and then they pull Ron out and go up to Hagrid's front door. And, of course, Hagrid shows back up at the door, like, looking kind of like irritated, and we realized, of course, that's because he thought that Lockhart was coming back. So they bring Ron in, and we get a description of Hagrid's. We know what that looks like. And Hagrid's like, better out than in. And he gives Ron something to throw up in, basically. That's cute. And Hermione's, they're just probably nothing we can really do anyway. Just wait for him to stop. And Hermione mentions that's a difficult curse to work at the best of times, but with a broken wand. So, like, again, it's like we get sort of like a glimpse at, like, what Ron, when he's determined, and in this particular case, angry, might have been able to do. Like, there's a good chance that if he had a functioning wand, that Malfoy would be belching slugs in the hospital wing right now. Anyway, that's not what happens, and so... No. And they ask him about Lockhart, and he kind of like basically dismisses him, and says that if any word of it was true, I'll eat my kettle. And they're kind of like aware that like it's not really one of Hagrid's thing to criticize Hogwarts teachers, including Snape, as it turns out. So they're like, oh wow. And of course Hermione, who's still like under the spell, as it were, not literally spell, but the spell of a crush on Lockhart, is like, I think you're being a bit unfair. Dumbledore obviously thought he was the best man for the job. And that's when we find out from Hagrid that he was the only man for the job. And Hagrid's like, and I mean the only one. Because people are starting to think that the dark arts job is jinxed, because nobody's lasted for a while, which we eventually realize why later, but not in this book. But most of you anyway. So Hagrid's asking him who he tried to curse, when he got this backfired spell. And and Harry intercedes, and he's like, Malfoy called Hermione something, and it must have been really bad because everybody went mad. And Ron, and this is, Ron has his faults. Obviously, I'm Team Ron anyway, but this is like kind of a nice. It just gives you an insight into not only Ron, but really the way he was raised in the Weasley family, because like he's like, he explains that Malfoy called her Mudblood, and Hagrid looks outraged too, and he's like, he can't believe it either. He's like, he didn't. And she's like, I don't know what it means. I could tell it was really rude. And Ron's like, no, it's about the most insulting thing he could think of. And he just said that we find out. I mean, and the name does kind of give itself away, but he's like, it's a really foul name for someone who was Muggle-born. And Ron gives a little bit more of that like exposition about how with some of the older pureblood families like Malfoy's family think they're better than everyone because of their blood status. But of course, they're not really truly pure blood anyway. And Ron's like, obviously we know that the ones of us who have any sense know that it doesn't matter. And he makes a comment about Neville as an example of being pure blood and who barely can manage anything. And Hagrid mentions and of course they haven't invented a spell that our Hermione can't do. My Hagrid voice is progressively getting worse through this and repetitive. Sorry. And Ron's like, yeah, it's a disgusting thing to call someone dirty blood, common blood. He really fleshes out like what it's about and how, and how he said, most wizards are half-blood anyway because if they hadn't married muggles, they'd have died out. So that's one of those things, and I've mentioned it before in this series, that Ron gives us in a lot of cases the look into the wizarding world just of a common wizarding person, somebody who just knows the things that are common knowledge the way that muggles would know something that's common to their world. Anyway, and since Ron is the of the three, the only one that was raised in the wizarding world, he provides that perspective a fair amount. And Hagrid's like, yeah, I don't blame you for cursing him or trying to, but probably just as well that it didn't work out because Lucius Malfoy probably would have come up to the school and he says, at least you're not in trouble, and Harry has the thought of like, trouble probably doesn't come much worse than having slugs pouring out of your mouth. But truth be told, Hagrid's still right. Like, yeah, belching up slugs sucks, but it's not trouble in the sense that you don't have the attention of like, the authority figures at the school or somebody else's parent who's like a evil kind of person who's got, a lot of influence at the ministry. So yeah, unfortunate circumstances for Ron here, but not the most unfortunate. Yeah. Oh right, and then Hagrid actually makes a joke, and it's not that Hagrid's not funny, but for some reason I feel like there aren't too many times that he actually does this kind of thing. Maybe I'll as I'm going through, I'll be proven wrong at some point and remember. But this is one time because he's like, he really gets Harry like he gets him good. He's like, oh, I heard you've been giving out signed photos, and how come I don't have one? And Harry's like, I have not been giving out signed photos, and but then like as he's kind of like protesting, he realizes that Hagrid's laughing at him and he's joking. Which is kind of great. And he says that he told Lockhart that you didn't need to because you're more famous than him without trying. And Harry's like, yeah, I bet he didn't like that. And he's like, nah, don't think he did. Right. So then Hagrid takes them out back to show them his pumpkins, as they're finishing their tea. And Hagrid's got a dozen giant pumpkins, which we find out in a moment that they're for the Halloween feast, and Hagrid's been using his umbrella, his wand that's hiding in his umbrella, which I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but that I'm fairly certain that since we find out in Book 7 that the Elder Wand can repair other wands. Spoiler alert. That Dumbledore mended Hagrid's wand, so it's not that he just has the 2 empty pieces inside of his umbrella, that he's actually concealing the repaired wand, which is why he's able to actually perform fairly adept magic whenever he needs to. I still don't really understand how, and I probably have mentioned this before too, but how Dumbledore wasn't able to essentially prove that it wasn't Hagrid that did the thing with the Chamber of Secrets and caused the attacks, and to do enough to get him another wand and to get a chance to finish his magical education. Like, it's just, I don't know, it's one of the more, like, in my opinion, tragically unfair scenarios, even though obviously Hagrid has a lot of other advantages because of his half giantism. But all the same, I mean, he has a wand, technically, it's just concealed. But he should be able to carry one in the open. That's just, anyway. Right. So anyway, yeah, these pumpkins are giant. It says they're the size of a large boulder. And yeah, Hagrid's like, I've been giving him a bit of help. His flowery pink umbrella cracks me up. It's interesting though, because Harry suspects that Hagrid's wand is in there, but there's never any mention of how it might be functioning, because, well, none of that stuff has really been explored in Book 2 anyway. Like the whole, well, that's not true exactly, because Ron's wand is broken in this book, and so we're actually seeing, right? Okay, yeah. This is kind of direct contrast if you think about it, because moments before this, scene-wise, Ron uses his broken spellotape wand to attempt to perform a curse, and it backfires on him and doesn't work. And then we find out that Hagrid, who has what should be a snapped-in-two wand by the Ministry, is able to use it to use an engorgement charm or whatever on his pumpkins to help them along. So we're kind of, if I'm not mistaken, we're kind of being told that Hagrid's wand must be repaired and not just stuck back together, because if it was stuck back together, it would be behaving like Ron's wand. Right. Let's see. So oh yeah, and Hermione's like, an engorgement charm, I suppose. And he's like, well, you've done a good job on them. Which, again, what I just said. And that's when Hagrid's like, that's what your little sister said, talking to Ron. And so we find out that Ginny's come to visit Hagrid recently, and apparently she just said she was just looking around, but Hagrid says, I reckon she was hoping she might run into someone else at my house. And Hagrid's really giving Harry shit in this chapter, because he's like, if you ask me, she wouldn't say no to a signed photo. And Harry's like, fuck you, Hagrid, basically, without saying those words. And Hagrid and Ron are laughing, and then Ron sprays another slug. Ugh. And Hagrid's like, pumpkins. Which, it was Hagrid's idea to take him outside to the pumpkin patch, knowing that Ron was belching slugs. So, anyway, So they head back up to the school for lunch because it's time to eat, and Harry didn't get a chance to have breakfast because of the ridiculous early start to the Quidditch practice that never happened. Which, by the way, that's the thing about that. It's like crazy. Like they went out so early and never even like got started on a real practice. And like the way that team operates too, like it's not like the rest of them would have practiced. Because I mean, really, they would say that they couldn't practice without their seeker, but they could totally practice without their seeker. You could just focus on the chasers and beaters stuff. Like that's actually like the bulk of the game. The seeker's game is completely separate from the rest. So anyway, but I guarantee you they didn't have a practice. Not to mention they had to deal with the Slytherins, but anyway. And so they get back into the castle, and they run into McGonagall, and Ron and Harry are both informed that their detentions are coming up that evening. And Ron is going to be polishing silver in the trophy room with Filch, and without magic. And Harry is going to be helping Lockhart with answering his fan mail. And Harry's like, no, can I do the other thing? And McGonagall's like, do you want to go do regular manual labor instead of signing some stuff, like, or writing a few things? But of course, she probably knows that Harry hates Lockhart. Maybe she doesn't know yet. Yes, it is also storming here. I'm not using sound effects. Anyway, so yeah, so they're both feeling shitty, like, oh man. And Hermione's all looking at him like, well, you did break some rules. Because that's what Hermione does, The adults aren't enough. She's got to give them a little extra helping. And, okay. No, never mind. And of course, Ron's like bitching about what he's going to have to do, and Harry's like, I'd swap anytime. He's like, I used to clean all over the fucking place with the Dursleys, so, like, not a big deal. And he's like, oh, Lockhart, it's going to be a nightmare. Which, I mean, they both have reasons to dread what they have to do. So, yep. So Harry goes up to, the day goes by pretty quickly, and then he's headed up to do his detention, and so he has to go see Lockhart, and Lockhart's like, there's the scallywag. Because Lockhart uses words like scallywag. And Lockhart's, you could address the envelopes. So yeah, Harry's like, just feels like the time is dragging by, and blah 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 blah. So he's just kind of like, just kind of in a bit of a torpor, even though that word's not being used here, but that's the correct word. And Lockhart's just kind of going on, and he keeps catching phrases like, fame's a fickle friend, Harry, and celebrity is as celebrity does. Remember that. And then time passes. And so time is going on, and then he heard something. And so Harry hears the voice. It's sort of like one of the major plot devices in this book. He hears the voice, and the voice says, come to me. Let me rip you. Let me tear you. Let me kill you. Right. And so, yeah, that's really fucking creepy. And Harry, like, jumps and he's like, shouts, "What?" And Lockhart's like, thinks he's reacting to something that he just said. And he's all like, "I know." Yeah, and Harry's like, "No, the voice." And Lockhart's like, "What? What voice?" And he's like, "The voice. It said, didn't you hear it?" And Lockhart has no idea, like, honestly, what he's talking about. And we find out that they've been there for 4 hours. Jesus Christ. And Harry's freaked out, and Lockhart has no idea what's going on. So, yeah, he's like, he gets out and leaves, and so Harry gets back and gets up to their dormitory, and Ron's not back yet, so he just gets in bed and waits. And when Ron gets there, he's having his own private little hell, but not the same kind as Harry. His muscles are all seized up, and anyway, then he asks Harry what happened with Lockhart, and so Harry tells him the story, and Ron's like, and Lockhart said he couldn't hear it, and they're like, and he's like, yeah, and something invisible would have had to have opened the door. Ron, with his common sense stuff, and Harry's like, yeah, no, and so, yeah, the chapter ends with Harry being like, yeah, I don't get it either. So that's the end of that one. And so we have sort of like the setup for our mystery in this novel, because, as you might imagine, if you're going to introduce a voice that only Harry can hear, it ain't going to be the last time he hears it. So yeah, I don't feel like I really learned that much about Fred and George, except that they both had some lines. George was the one that spoke up in the meeting in the Quidditch changing rooms. That's pretty much it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I don't think there is. I'm whatever. It hasn't been as long since the last one as it had been, prior to that. So I'm hoping, I'm not making any promises. And everybody's like, well, of course you're not, because you never do. But I'm hoping to increase the frequency. I've had, a few people actually ask for more episodes lately, and that is really nice, and I apologize that it's taken this long, but I'm getting back into a better frame of mind, and I'm in a Potter state of mind too. So yeah, that'll do it for this one, but we will catch you next time, and peace.